Have you ever taken an extended break from lifting, whether that's for vacation or life happened, you were sick, or life just got crazy and you missed lifting for more than maybe 1 week at a time, and you're not quite sure how to ease back into training, what's the appropriate way to do so? Or every time you try to pick back up again, you end up being sore and frustrated because it feels like you can't possibly move back forward or get back into lifting in the same way that you're doing it before. In today's video, I'm gonna walk you through exactly the routine that I follow when coming off a long period of time away from resistance training, whether that's following a race or the 3-week vacation that I just took where I really wasn't able to access a gym or lift like I normally was as I ease back into training this week myself within my own training. Hello there friends, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, hello, I'm Dr. Alyssa Olenick, and if you're returning and you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and if you enjoy this video today, make sure you like and leave me a comment letting me know if you learned something in the process. So at the point of recording this video, I am just coming off a 3-week long vacation where I was out exploring the beautiful Canadian Rockies, as well as the mountains in Central Virginia, and kind of all over the place, whether it was in family or on these trips. And I really wasn't able to lift the normal routine that I normally do, which you guys can see in many of my week of training videos. I was able to get in 3 about 20 to 30 minute long dumbbell workouts, which I mostly just did some of my supplementary rehab-esque running, supporting lifting, but nothing formal like I would in my normal gym here. And now I didn't sweat this because I have taken off time from lifting many times over the years of my lifting career and history and training experience. And I know deep down it's gonna be fine. It's not that big of a deal, and we'll just keep moving forward as we go. And so the first thing I wanna remind you guys is that if you are new to lifting, or it's your first time taking a big chunk of training off, or you feel like, well, I should just give up if I lost lifting for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and life gets crazy, that is not the best response to that. The best thing that you can do is just pick back up and keep going. And it's the consistency over time that matters most, but also taking some time off here and there and isn't going to be the end of your training or your strength or your muscle gains. Of course, consistency matters, and showing up most of the time, most of the year does matter. But I've taken off 1 to 3 week chunks of training at many different points in my lifting career. And I can tell you right now, the world doesn't end. And as long as you keep on keeping on, you're gonna be okay. So my first tip is gonna be pretty simple. If you are following a consistent lifting program or a specific training program, and you've only taken 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks off like I did, and you haven't taken an extended period of time left, the best thing I'm gonna recommend you doing is just returning to the program that you were doing. One of the reasons in the Lyss method we build out a program that doesn't change every month that everyone does at the same time is because we have it so if you start on day 1, you can follow that through that first year into that second year of training at whatever pace you need, so that our clients are able to pause and repeat training phases, blocks, or weeks as needed, so that they can always do it at the progression of their own life and what that allows. I really like that approach for training for people as well, because life's gonna happen. We're humans, we're not elite athletes. I recommend going back to where you were at in your program before, but what I recommend, instead of just jumping back into the same intensity, weights, reps, sets, everything exactly as you did before, is that you simply pull back some of the volume or the intensity. Depending on how long of a period you took off training, you might need to decrease volume pretty significantly, maybe by half, and increase that gradually over time, or by 30%, or even a little bit less. So the more time you took off, the more you will have to pull that back. But if you are in less than a month since you've last lifted, yes, you don't want to jump back into exactly what you did before, but what you can do is go back to mostly everything that you were doing, but bring back that intensity. So intensity here is what I'm probably going to refer to is most likely going to be RPE, rating of perceived exertion, or the effort out of 10 of which you are doing your lifts. Now, in a normal training week, when you're in the swing of things, they're back to back, week after week, you're making progress, you're probably lifting somewhere between a 7 or 8, or maybe an 8 to 9 out of 10 effort in most of your lifts. When you're returning to the gym after an extended break or a long period of training off, you might want to pull that back to maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10 effort. Right now this week, jumping back into training with lifting specifically, especially considering my running volume is pretty high and I'm still running normally and I was able to run during my training and my vacation, is I don't want my soreness or the fatigue of this lifting to totally derail that training, or I just don't want to blow myself up. There's no reason to do so. So what happens when you come back to lifting, or you do a new lifting routine, or you start doing new movement patterns? The thing that makes you sore and tired is the novelty or the newness of the movement that you were doing. So when you come back to the gym after some time off, even if you had done the same things in the past, if it's been a few weeks, your body has lost that novelty or newness to that training. So when it sees it again, it gets more sore and more fatigued. One way to reduce this from happening or happening as badly as it may if you just jump back to normal is to simply decrease the intensity or the weight of what you're doing. So instead of doing a 8 out of 10 effort on your back squat or your bench press or your deadlift or whatever that is, just pulling it back to a 5 or 6. You're doing a lot less weight at a lower intensity, and you're just kind of reintroducing the movement pattern or your lifting in general to your body that week. You don't want to jump back into the gym that week and think of it being the best week of training you've ever had in your life, the most intense, pushing your max, because that's just going to blow you up. You want to think of it as a reintroduction week. And this holds true even for coming back into lifting after race training. It's kind of this reverse taper-like process that I recommend after following a race training that I also recommend here as well, which basically means you have a reintroduction week coming back into the gym, back into training. You're not there to set PRs. You're not there to do the most intense, most powerful, most aggressive lift of your life. You're just there to reintroduce the movement patterns to yourself. And one of the ways to do that without blowing yourself up is to pull back the intensity. The next one would be to pull back that volume. So you might say you do 2 sets instead of 3 on your compound movements that week. So you're doing less overall, but you're just bringing in that stimulus. Then on the next week of training, you can ramp back up that intensity a little bit. So maybe the next week you're lifting at a 6 to 7 out of 10 effort. And maybe you're bringing back in that 3rd set of lifting. Your body was already familiar with that from the week before. And every time your body is exposed to a movement pattern or a lifting pattern or whatever that looks like, something occurs known as the repeated bout effect. And this means that the more you do something, the more your body goes, hey, I know what that is. And the less sore and inflamed and fatigued and tired it gets the next time it sees it. So then that next week you can go a little bit more intense and add a little bit more because it won't be as novel, but we still don't want to blow ourselves back up. And then we can kind of ease back into or go back to on kind of that 3rd week where we were at before. Now, if you need 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to take this process of easing back in after some time off, or even a reverse taper after a race training season or peaking for a race and your taper, it really just depends on how long you took off lifting and or how much you let it go during that time. So if you took 1 week off lifting, you can probably actually return to your normal lifting pretty normally, maybe in that more 6 to 7 range right off the bat. Or if you took 2 weeks off lifting, you might need a week to reintroduce it and a week to get back to normal. If you took 3 weeks off lifting like me, you can kind of think of it as 1 week for each week taken off. I have a week of introduction. Next week will be a little bit more of a normal week of training, but I won't push quite as hard. And by the 3rd week, I'll be able to push just as hard as I was before I left and be back to normal, so on and so forth. So kind of give yourself that roughly 1 week for 1 week off to get back to normal, so to speak, but making sure that you're easing into training before then pushing that volume and intensity back up and ramping it back up to where you were before. My next tip is if you are doing a lot of endurance training or cardio training or training for a race like I am in this moment, you might want to just maintain the volume of what you've been training at while you reintroduce that lifting back in. Remember that even though you've done it in the past and you've historically been adapted to it, right now you have lost that just a tad, and you maybe don't want to blow yourself up and overdo how much stress your body is handling or the stress buckets of your body. So you may that week while adding it back, especially if you feel like you're having an additional amount of fatigue or soreness in response to that, just simply maintaining or pulling back just a little bit that week as you allow your body to reintroduce and readapt to that, and then kind of letting that rise back to normal as well. And last but not least, with all things training, stress from training, adaptation, soreness, fatigue, all of the above, you want to make sure that when you are adding back in something to your training, especially if you've taken extended time off, that you're making sure that you're eating a little bit more and making sure you're supporting your sleep, because that novel stimulus, that new stressor on your body will be a little bit more damaging and fatiguing while it's new than when you are adapted to it. So you might need a little bit of a bump or a boost in your calories or a little bit more sleep as your body readapts to that stress and stimulus of your lifting training. Now, again, this will be dictated by how much time you actually took off and how deconditioned you became during that. A week or 2 off probably isn't going to be that drastically different on your body, but if we're looking at 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks off or multiple months off, you want to think about, how can I support my body as we re-add this back in? And it might be a little bit more stressful to it or more damaging or fatiguing until it readapts to that over time. Now, lastly, let's chat about what happens if you've taken an extended period of time off lifting. You're like, okay, Alyssa, well, that's just a week or 2 or 3, but what about if you've taken a really, really long period of time off lifting and you're wanting to get back into it, but you don't even know where to start again? Most of the advice I gave you in this video actually still applies to you. The only difference is that when you are easing back into the gym or coming back into training, recognizing that the weights that you were able to lift when you were last in the gym might not be where you can go at right now, and kind of assuming that everything is a little bit less and taking everything a bit of a step back until you can readjust and readapt into it. I still think a good solid 3 to 4 weeks of easing back in will get you back to your new or current baseline of lifting or training, using RPE to largely dictate the weights that you're picking and the intensity you're training at. And then from there, you can kind of figure out, what is my new baseline? What is my baseline of strength or my capacity in the gym, and building and moving from there. Of course, a good training program and good coaches like what we offer for you in the Lyss method can help you ease back into that training. And a big thing that I think a lot of people are unwilling to do more often, or feel too below them to do, or kind of as a blow to the ego to do, is sometimes we need to take a step back and regress our training a little bit as we readapt, so then we can take progress and move it forward. This might apply to people who took a really long time off training or formal resistance training for something that happened in life, maybe having a baby, an injury, you're finishing up a degree, you were training for a race, and you took a very long extended period of time off lifting. You may just simply have to pull back so that then you can move or go forward. I think that's a harder lesson to learn for many than it is to kind of say it out loud, but don't be afraid to take a step back and allow yourself to ease in and to adapt to that training, similarly to what we laid out here. But recognize your fitness and your capacity right now might just be a little bit lower than where it was before, but that doesn't mean that you are less worthy or less fit or less valuable or, a piece of crap for falling off training. It just means that that is the potential of which you are able to return to when you get consistent with your training again. I know a lot of people can be on and off with their lifting, and I do encourage you, of course, to find whatever consistency you can. Falling off and easing back in all the time won't make you as much progress as following a program consistently across time. But of course, doing some sort of resistance training most of the time, as often as you can, in any way that you can, it's going to be more beneficial and better for you than not doing it at all. It's okay to take a week off here or there, or have a long trip where you aren't resistance training because you're out living your life. It's important to remember that we do what we do in the gym here so that we can go do those amazing things outside of the gym as well. I will never sacrifice my life and adventure and using my body in other ways to simply stay in my gym and be a gym rat. It's about having that balance of both, and it's okay if sometimes those ebb and flow, but we want to get back into lifting because it does have so many beneficial things for us, and it's important to do, but also we want to make sure that we're not blowing ourselves up and taking care of our bodies in the process of returning to lifting in the gym. So if you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment telling me something that you learned or a lesson that you're struggling to learn when it comes to taking time off and adding in lifting, or simply returning to the gym after those things. I want you to know that it's totally okay if you feel a little bit nervous getting back into things. It's okay if you feel like you lost all your fitness and your potential and you're less fit. It will start to even out and you will start to feel stronger and better in a few weeks, but just give it some time, give yourself grace, and get back after it. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks for being here.